Hi everybody, this is Bonnie Barker with Bonnie Babe Crochet, and today I want to show you how to make the Balmoral cabled throw. Let me go ahead and show you what you're going to need. For this project, I'm going to be using Premier's Just Yarn Value. Each of these large skeins has 875 yards, 800 meters, approximately 14 ounces or 400 grams. This is 100% acrylic. And the number of these I will be using will be listed just right across the bottom of your screen. Now, if you have smaller hanks or skeins of yarn, please know that you're going to need more of them, and I would just encourage you to do some math, go by the number of yards needed. I'll go ahead and put the total number of yardage that I used for this project, and so then what you can do is just take that number and divide it by the number of yards and whatever skeins you have, and thereby determine how many skeins of your yarn that you're going to need. And for the record, the color of the yarn that I'm using is called linen. I also recommend that you have a size J or 10 or 6.00 millimeter crochet hook, and as always, a yarn needle and a pair of sharp scissors will come in very handy. I'm also recommending that you have some stitch markers so that you can better help mark the rows when we begin working the cables. Now, if you don't have stitch markers like that, that's not a problem. You can always just use contrasting colors of yarn so that it will help to mark where you are. To begin, we're going to start with our slip knot and the starting chain of 183 chains. After working that starting chain of 183 chains, we're going to work a double crochet starting in the fourth chain from the hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to work that double crochet there. And we're going to work in each chain all the way across. So go ahead and work those. At the end of this row, you should have a total of 180 double crochets, and that is not including the chain at the beginning. So at the end of row 1, you should have 180 stitches, and again, that's not including the chain at the very beginning. All right, for row 2, we're going to chain 2, and this is where we begin the ribbing. We're going to skip the first stitch. We're going to work a front post double crochet in that next stitch, and then a back post double crochet in that next stitch. If you've never worked a post stitch, they're relatively easy. Instead of working in through the top loops, you're going to work your hook around the body of the stitch and then complete the stitch. It's like giving it a belt. For a back post, we come into the back door, work the hook around the body and then out the side, and then complete the stitch. So go ahead and work this all the way across, and I'll show you how the row ends. At the end of round 2, we end by working a front post double crochet in that last stitch, and then we're going to work a half double crochet worked into that turning chain. And so this is what you should have at the end of row 2. Now for row 3, we're going to turn, chain 2, and the odd number of rows during the ribbing is going to start with a back post double crochet. We always skip the end stitch here, and we start with a back post double crochet followed by a front post double crochet. And do make sure that you're working front post over the front post and back post over the back post stitches so that you are forming the ribbing like this, and you can see it's that way on the back side as well. So go ahead and work that all the way across. When you get to the last stitch, you're going to work a back post double crochet for the last stitch, and then work a half double in the turning chain. This is what you should have after completing 3 rows. Now for rows 4 through 7, we're going to repeat rows 2 and 3 2 more times. So go ahead and do that. If you need support on how to work rows 2 and 3 again, look at the bottom of the screen. I'll put a little time mark where you can re-watch these 2 rows should you need to. This is what you should have after working those 7 rows with the ribbing. Let me go ahead and show you row 8, and this is the row that starts to establish what we'll be doing for the majority of this project. We're going to chain 2, again skip that first stitch, and we're going to work the ribbing stitch over the first 10 or the next 10 stitches. So we start with a front post and then a back post. And we're going to do that 5 times. Front post and then back post. And so I'm going to work this until I've worked over the first 10 stitches. So this is what you should have after working those first 10 stitches. You'll see 5 of the ribs in front, and then of course 5 behind. Now we're going to start in the next stitch, and you want to be careful not to double dip in stitches. Like this is the stitch that we just worked the post stitch on, so this, which is a front post, is the next stitch that we're going to work in. And we're going to work what I like to call a wattle stitch, W-A-T-T-L-E, and it's just simply a combination of 3 stitches, and it's worked in to the top loops for the first row that we established this. We work a single crochet, a chain 1, and a double crochet in through the same stitch, skip the next 2 stitches, and that's a wattle stitch. So we're going to work the second one in the same way, single crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet, and we're going to work these throughout, and you'll understand this better as we go forward. But these are going to be the stitches that kind of form a nice fabric background to try to, they kind of enhance the cabling that we're going to be working. Okay, so after we work that wattle stitch, again we skip 2 stitches, and now we're going to work the foundations for these cables, and these are smaller cables. So we're going to work 2 front post double crochets, and then a half double worked into the top loops in the next stitch, and then again 2 front post double crochets, and then a half double worked into the top loops. Whenever you work these half doubles, they're always going to be worked usually into other half doubles, but into the top loops, not as post stitches. We're going to do this again. 2 front post double crochets, and then a half double, and then we're going to work just 2 more front post double crochets. Okay, let's pause and take a look at what we have. So we have 2 front post, a half double, 2 front post, a half double, 2 front post, and a half double. And this is going to be the foundation for a cable, of one of these medium-sized cables. And we're going to work 9 of these in this project. Okay, so that's one foundation. And in between the foundation, we're going to work the wattle stitch. So again, go ahead and back up. In the next stitch, we work that single crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet. Skip the next 2 stitches, and we do it again. Single crochet, chain 1, and double crochet. Skip 2 stitches, and then we're back to working the foundation, just what we worked here, all over again. So we're going to work that across. So we're going to work, I'll work this again with you. So we have 2 front post double crochets, half double worked into the top loops, and then again 2 front post double crochets, half double, and 2 more front post double crochets, half double, and again 2 front post double crochets. So we should have 4 of these, or 4 sets with the half doubles in between. And again, it's time to work 2 more waddle stitches, single crochet, chain 1, double crochet in that next stitch, skip 2, and then single crochet, chain 1, double crochet, and then skip 2, and then we're off to doing it all over again. So go ahead and repeat what I just worked for you all the way across the row. So after working this across most of the row, you should have 9 repeats of the foundational cabling and the 2 waddle stitches after that. And that will leave you 10 stitches. So we're going to skip these next 2 stitches, and then the 10 that are left, we're going to start with a back post double crochet, followed by a front post double crochet over those last 10 stitches. So do be sure that after you work this last waddle stitch, you are skipping 2 stitches, and again start with a back post for the next. After working those 10 ribbed stitches, we're going to work a half double crochet in the chain into the chain space. Okay, so what you have here is we're going to continue this ribbing along both sides of the throw. So this is the end of the throw, and the beginning of the throw, we also have those 10 stitches. So that again is going to be the border. So you're not going to have to come behind and crochet a border after you complete the throw. You're completing the border as we go, row by row. All right, so now for row number 9, this will be the back side facing us. We're going to work a chain 2, and then starting with the back post double crochet, we're going to work over those 10 stitches only with the back post, followed by a front post, and alternate that over those first 10 stitches. After we complete those first 10 stitches of the ribbing, and every time you work an odd number row, you are going to begin with the same way, with the back post followed by the front post. Now working in the 2 waddle stitches, and this is how we're going to work in all the waddle stitches. We skip the double crochet, and working only in the chain 1 space, we work a waddle stitch, which again is the single crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet. Again, skipping the single crochet and the double crochet. So basically, when you look at the written pattern, it's going to tell you that just working in the chain 1 space of those waddle stitches, okay, that's what you're going to do. Work another waddle stitch, single crochet, chain 1, double crochet. Now working over the post stitches, which is the foundation that we continue to build, we're going to work 2 back post double crochets, followed by a half double worked into those top loops, and again 2 back post double crochets, followed by a half double crochet worked into the top loops, 2 more back post double crochets, and another half double crochet, and 2 more back post double crochets, and then that brings us to the waddle stitches again, which we are working only in the chain 1 space. We work that 3 stitch waddle stitch, and then we work in the next one as well. Single crochet, chain 1 and a double crochet. And then after that, it just repeats across the row with, again, the 2 back post double crochets followed by a half double, etc. 2 back post double crochets, half double, 2 back post double crochets, half double, and then 2 back post double crochets, wattle stitch, and wattle stitch. So go ahead and work row 9 all the way across. I'll show you what to do when you get to the last 10 stitches. At the end of row 9, we're going to end by working a front post double crochet followed by a back post double crochet, and we work that over the last 10 stitches. And after we do that, we work a half double crochet in the chain 2 space. So this is what you should have after completing 9 rows. And again, you should have 9 repeats of the columns that are starting and followed by the 2 wattle stitches. And of course we started with 2 wattle stitches at the beginning, but that's what you should have after 9 rows. Now this is row 10, and this is where the cabling is going to begin. We're going to chain 2, and just like before, we're just going to work the ribbing front post, back post, front post, back post over these first 10 stitches, and also work the 2 stitches in the wattle stitches. So go ahead and work those. When working the ribbing, let me just make a special note here. Make sure that you work that back post double crochet. You may not see it, and it'd be very easy to skip and thereby reduce the number of stitches here. So make sure that you do have 10 stitches on the ribbed section. And I'll go ahead and work these wattle stitches with you in the chain 1 spaces. Okay, and so now I'm going to put a picture right here of this beginning section so you get a vision for where we're heading. Now on these stitches, we are going to cross these 2 columns with what I call a back cross, and then we're going to cross these 2 with a front cross. And that is going to vary as we alternate from cable to cable. So let me go ahead and show you. We're going to start with a back cross. We're going to skip the first 2 cables, or the first 2 post stitches rather, half double in the next stitch, which is the half double. Now we're going to work front post trebles, that's the larger stitch, in the next 2 stitches. Now this is a back cross because at this point we're going to work behind these 3 stitches, but we're still going to work front post trebles here and here. So we're going to come back into the opening behind these 3 stitches, and again use the nerve endings in your thumb and tall man finger to locate the stitches. So it's right here, and then we're going to work a front post in each of these stitches. This is a little bit tricky at first. Give yourself some time, and I will have some stitch videos in the video description below that you can take a look at. Okay, so the next stitch is right here. So go ahead and you can pull that stitch just like that. Again, using the nerve endings in your hands there. Half double in that next stitch. And now we're going to work a front cross where we skip the next 2 stitches, half double in the next stitch, front post trebles in the next 2 stitches, and this is definitely the easier of these 2. Front cross, you're going to work in front of those 3 stitches, and we're going to front post treble here and then here. I'm going to go ahead and work the 2 wattle stitches just so that I can anchor these stitches a little bit. But I did want to pause and take a look at what we just did. So by crossing these cables with, again, a back cross and a front cross, this is opening up, and it's going to open into like a honeycomb, like a medium honeycomb. It's going to go up, and then eventually it's going to close again. Okay. Now the next cable is going to be a bit different. These are actually going to cross inward. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. Where we worked a back cross and then a front cross, we're going to work instead a front cross over these two columns and then a back cross over these. It's going to cross inward. So let's, well, first of all, start by skipping these 2 stitches, half double that next stitch, front post treble in the next 2 stitches. Remember I said we're working the front cross first, so we're going to work in front of those 3 stitches, and we front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped. Half double in that next half double. And then now we're going to work a back cross. Skip 2 stitches, half double in that next stitch, front post treble in the next 2 stitches, working behind those 3 stitches, we're going to come into the opening in the back and then front post treble in this stitch, and do that again, and front post treble in the next stitch. Okay, so let's work the wattle stitches after that. And then I want to pause and just take a look at what we just did, because this is basically going to be the repeat across the row. So you see we have the front cross and the back cross, so the cables are coming in like this. And these cables are going out. Okay, so we had a back cross and then a front cross. So what we're going to do is we're going to work this from this point to this point across the row, and then at the end we'll work one more of the back cross and then the front cross. So we're going to go ahead and work this around, or work this all the way across, and until you get to those last 10 or 11 stitches or so. Okay, so when you work this, and if you're not sure what to do next, so remember these are going to go outward and then these are going to go inward with the way they cross. So we're going to go back cross, front cross, back cross, and then back cross, front cross, back cross, all the way across the row. Let's go ahead and take a look at row 10. So we started again with the ribbing. Remember to make sure you have 10 stitches there, and that one back post double crochet is not visible, but make sure you don't skip that. 2 wattle stitches, and then we have a back cross, then a front cross, the 2 wattle stitches, then a front cross, and then a back cross. So remember, these are opening out and these tend to close in. Then we have back cross, back cross, back cross. And again, make sure you do a visual check to make sure they're opening out, closing in, opening out, closing in. And the last set, the 9th set, is a repeat of what we did at the beginning, which again, they open out. And followed by 2 wattle stitches. And then those last 10 stitches begin with a back post. So again, don't skip that. Front post, back post, etc. And then a half double worked in the chain 2. All right, so now let's turn And this is row number 11. We start with a chain 2. And again, those 10 stitches, starting with a back post double crochet, followed by a front post double crochet. And then after we do that, we do the 2 wattle stitches. So go ahead and do as much as that. Now when you're working over the back side where the cables were crossed, we're going to work 2 back post double crochets, and then in between that last stitch and the next stitch, this is where those 2 columns crossed, we're going to work a half double crochet, and then 2 more back post double crochets. Now looking at this, we're going to skip this half double and then work a half double in the next half double. And just for your information, that's not going to change the stitch count. The stitch count is going to pretty much stay constant throughout because we've added this one in and then we skip this one, so it kind of cancels mathematically. The other side, we do the same. 2 back post double crochets, and in between the last stitch and the next stitch, which is over here where those 2 cables crossed, we're going to work a half double crochet. These are spacers that will help give our stitches definition. And then we do 2 more back post double crochets. And that's basically how you work over the cable section, the row after those cables or the columns have been crossed. So let's go ahead and I'm going to work these 2 wattle stitches, and I'm going to show you what this looks like one more time. So again, and these have crossed differently because you have the front cross and the back cross, now you have the back cross and the front cross. So, but you do it basically the same way. 2 back post double crochets, and in between where those 2 columns crossed, we work a half double in between that last stitch and the next stitch, and then 2 more back post double crochets. And again, there was a half double that you don't see that we're skipping, and then another half double that we do work into the top loops. And then we only have a couple more stitches to go here. 2 more back post double crochets, half double in between that last stitch and the next stitch, and then 2 more back post double crochets. And again, we're skipping this half double, and then we work into the 2 wattle stitches. And just to be clear, we're going to continue that across, and then of course we work those last 10 rib stitches. But let's go ahead and take a look at how this is adding more definition on the other side of the throw. So go ahead and work these all the way across the row. So this is what row 11 looks like from the back side after completing. And then when we turn, you see more definition. All right, now for row 12, I need to get out my stitch markers. Okay, so as we look at these cables, the ones that were turned inward, let's go ahead and put a stitch marker on every one of those. There should be 4 of these, so I'm going to put a stitch marker. I'm going to just put it right here in that single crochet of the wattle stitch, mostly as a reminder that we're going to have to do something special here, which mainly is cross the cable. So what we're going to do with these is we are going to cross these 2 cables. It's going to be that little cable in the center. Okay, so these are outward, so we don't cross anything here. Let's go ahead and put a reminder on this next one that we will have to cross that next cable, we don't cross this one. And again, the one that's crossed inward, go ahead and put a reminder here. Again, this is optional. You don't have to run out and purchase these. I just find it helpful as a visual reminder, especially when teaching. And it also helps me to remember to cross the cable. All right, so do we have, okay, all of those. And of course, the ones, like I said, that are going outward, we're just going to make a large honeycomb with those, or a medium size, technically. Okay, so for row 12, we're going to chain 2, and we're going to do the front post, back post over those 10 stitches. And again, don't forget this back post, which is stitch number 10. And then go ahead and do the 2 wattle stitches, and then I'll show you how to do the rest of these stitches. So after completing those stitches, we're going to work over the honeycomb. Those are the one that is opening outward. We just work front post double crochets over those first 2 stitches, a half double worked into the half double, and then again 2 front post double crochets, and then a half double into that half double. And again, this is very similar, or to working row number 10. And then 2 more front post doubles. So let's take a pause and look at that, and you can see these just growing a little bit bigger. All right, so now we get to the wattle stitches, and then I see my stitch marker to remind me of crossing a cable. So let's go ahead and complete these wattle stitches. And let's talk about this. So we're going to be crossing these 2 center columns. So let's go ahead and put that towards the front there. Stitch marker has done its job. So we're going to work front post double crochets over the first 2 stitches, or that first column, half double in the next half double. Now this is where we cross with a front cross. We skip the next 2 stitches, half double, that half double. We're going to work front post treble crochets in the next 2 stitches. Working in front of those 3 stitches, we're going to cross or work front post trebles in those 2 stitches that we just skipped. Half double in the next half double, and front post double crochets in the next 2 stitches. And then we're going to follow that up with 2 more wattle stitches. I'll go ahead and work these with you, and then I'll stop and show you the repeat. Okay, so you can see how that looks with this column on the outside, and then the 2 in the center are crossed as a cable. All right, so this is the repeat all the way across, where we go from the honeycomb to the cable in the center, and that's just going to alternate all the way across the row in the same way. And whenever you get to the stitch marker that we placed, remember that you need to cross the center cable. And then of course at the end you work, let me go ahead and show you the end of the row. You're going to start with a back post double crochet after those wattle stitches and work those 10 ribbed stitches, followed by a half double in the chain 2 turning chain. After completing 12 rows, this is what those cables should look like. Now do a quick visual check before going on, just to make sure that every other cable has that center crossing. So I'm going to do a quick visual check. and it looks like we're good. I would highly recommend, even after you understand this cabling system very well, that you would stop at the end of every row, especially with the front side facing, and just do a quick visual check. The reason is it's very easy to just start crossing the cables and cross ones that should not be crossed. And in fact, I just recently did that. So be very careful to pay attention to where your stitch markers are if you want to use that system, and that you cross only every other stitch or cable set when you're working repeats of row number 12. All right, so now for row 13, we're going to turn, and we have the back side facing, so that means we're going to chain 2, and we're going to start with a back post double crochet and end with the front post over those 10 ribbing stitches, wattle stitch, and then let me talk you through the rest of this. We're going to do 2 back post double crochet, half double, 2 back post double, half double, 2 back post double, half double, 2 back post doubles. That's over the honeycomb section. Wattle stitch, and then working over the cable that's had these stitches crossed, we're going to work 2 back post, half double, 2 back post, half double in between that last stitch and the next stitch, 2 back post doubles, skip this half double in this stitch, and then 2 back post double crochets, again wattle stitch. So go ahead and work that all the way across for row 13. This is what you should have after completing 13 rows. So let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to do on this particular row. I think it'll be easier just to talk about it instead of showing it to you. We're going to begin again with the chain 2, and we start with the front post, back post over those 10 stitches. Again, don't forget the back post double crochet here, the 2 wattle stitches. For the large honeycombs, or I should say the medium honeycombs, because there is a larger version that I have in some of my other designs, we're just going to do 2 front post double crochets, half double, 2 front post doubles, half double, 2 front post, half double, 2 front post double crochets, wattle stitch. Now when we come to these cables, which there are 4 of, we are going to cross the cables again, the one in the center. So we're going to work 2 front post double crochets, a half double. We're going to cross these cables again, and I will show you that, half double, and then 2 front post double crochets, and again the 2 wattle stitches. And that's how we're going to work these 2 cables on this row. And again, you can look at the stitch markers just to remind you that, yeah, you're going to be crossing cables here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and work up into this point, so I'll show you that cable crossing. Now when we get to the other cable, let me show you how we're going to work this. We're going to work front post double crochet over those first 2 stitches, half double and the half double. And after we do that, we're going to cross the next 2 columns. Skip those 2 stitches, half double in that next stitch, front post treble in the next 2 stitches, working in front of those 3 stitches. We're going to front post treble. This is the front cross, and those 2 stitches that we just skipped. Okay, so we have a little twist there. Half double in that next stitch, and then 2 front post double crochets. So let's go ahead and pause and take a look at that. So we have this small, short little cable crossed right in the center. So go ahead and work that across the row. And again, when you get to the end of the row, and yes, I do know that I am repeating myself, make sure that you start with the back post double crochet over the ribbing. And the reason that I'm saying this is I have made this mistake before and have omitted working this stitch. So make sure that you don't do that so that you keep the stitch count constant. After turning, we're going to start row 15 with a chain 2 and a back post double crochet, front post, back post, front post, all the way, and our last will be a front post of that 10 stitch series, and then waddle stitch, and then just like we did before, we're going to work back post double crochets over these post stitches, half doubles in the middle, all the way across that, so 2 back post, half double, 2 back post, half double, etc. The 2 waddle stitches, and then when we get to the cable that was crossed, it's just like we did 2 rows ago. 2 back post doubles, half double, 2 back post doubles, and we're going to work a half double in between that last stitch and the next stitch, and that's where those 2 columns crossed. 2 more back post double crochets, skip this half double, work a half double in this stitch, and then 2 back post double crochets, waddle stitch, and a waddle stitch. So go ahead and work that all the way across row 15. Now I want to talk about what we're going to do with the cables for row 16. We're going to cross all of the columns this row, and this row or these 2 columns will be crossed with a front cross, which is like this, and these 2 are going to be crossed with a back cross, which looks like this. So again, front cross, back cross, and then when we cross the cables over here, this is going to be a back cross, and this will be a front cross. Okay, so we're gonna, again, we're swapping it back and forth, and then you'll just do that again and again. Again, like this will be a front cross, this will be a back cross, this will be a back cross, and this will be a front cross. And once I begin demonstrating this to you, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And to begin, go ahead and work the chain 2 and work front post, back post, front post, back post double crochets over those 10 stitches. Again, don't forget number 10 stitches a back post double crochet, and then work the waddle stitches, and then I'll show you the crossing of the cables for these 2 particular cables. So now we get to the first cable, which is the honeycomb. We're going to skip those first 2 stitches, half double in that half double, and then we're going to work a front cross. First we work 2 front post treble crochets, then working in front of those last 3 stitches, we front post treble in the 2 stitches that we skipped. After that, we're going to work a half double in that next stitch, which is right in the middle of the cable. Skip the next 2 stitches, half double in that next stitch, front post treble in the next 2 stitches, and again we're only using the front post treble when we cross the stitches. I'm working now a back cross, so working behind those 3 stitches, we're going to come into the opening back here and front post treble in each of these 2 stitches that we skipped. Alright, and then followed that by the 2 waddle stitches worked in the chain 1 spaces. And I'm going to take a pause so that we can look at what we just did. So when we work this, you'll understand now why it's a honeycomb, because it is enclosed. Okay, so this large, it's really a medium-sized honeycomb, is complete. And that's the way all of these cables, every other cable, will look like this. Again, we worked a front cross and then a back cross. Now for the other cable, we're going to work a back cross and then a front cross. So we'll skip these 2 stitches, half double in that next stitch, front post treble in the next 2 stitches. Now working behind these 3 stitches, we're going to front post treble in those 2 that we just skipped. Work a half double in that next half double. Skip the next 2 stitches, half double in that next half double. And when you're at this stage, you can see it doesn't look like a whole lot, but we're not done yet. Front post treble in the next 2 stitches. And now this is where we work the front cross, working in front of those stitches. We front post treble in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. And let's go ahead and work those 2 wattle stitches after that cable. And let's take another pause so that we can look at what we just did. So you can see this, it's like a little bonbon, almost like a piece of candy with this small cable here. We've worked the back cross and the front cross, and then so we are going to alternate these 2 all the way across the blanket or the throw, and the last that we are going to work will also be like the honeycomb. And then you know how to finish out the rest with the 2 wattle stitches and those 10 front and back post double crochets. Okay, so that is going to be row 16. So you'll go ahead and finish row 16. But just to give you a preview of what's going to happen is when we come back 2 rows later, we're going to continue these cables, but they're going to alternate now. What you see on this side is going to begin to appear up here, up here, and what you see here is going to appear up on this. So they're going to alternate back and forth throughout the project, and you'll see that. But let's go ahead now and just finish row 16, and then I'll show you how to go from there. This is how your cabling should look after completing 16 rows. Now for row 17, we're going to turn, and let me just talk you through this one because you've done everything that you need to do on this particular row. Again, we're going to chain 2, and we begin with back post double crochet over those 10 stitches, and we end with a front post. 2 wattle stitches, and we're just going to work back post double crochets over the next 2 stitches, a half double in between the last stitch and the next stitch, and then 2 more back post doubles, half double, 2 back post doubles, half double in between those 2 stitches, and then 2 more back post doubles. We're going to skip this stitch, and then we work wattle stitch, and then we do it again. It just may look a little different. 2 back post, half double crochet, 2 more back post worked coming from that direction, of course. Again, skip this stitch, half double in the center, 2 more back post, half double in between the last stitch and the next stitch, and then 2 more back post double crochets, and again wattle stitch, and just do that all the way across. And just like we've been doing, when we get to the end of the row, do make sure you have 10 post stitches. You end with a back post double crochet. I know I've said that many times, and you're probably getting tired of hearing me say that, and that's actually a good thing so that you can remember. And why do I say that again and again and again? Because this is a mistake that I have myself have made. And I don't even want to get into that because it just meant much more work for me once I had to rip out and correct it, and I just want to prevent you from having to do that. Half double in that turning chain. So go ahead and complete row 17. this is what you should have after having worked 17 rows. Now we're going to do something pretty important. We're going to take these stitch markers. Remember, we had these to remind us to, let me go ahead and take that out, to work the cables in the center. Well, we're going to move these right over here. We're going to put them to the right or to the left, however you want to do this if you're working left-handed, to the right of the honeycombs. I'm going to go ahead and take the time to go ahead and move those right now. All right, so you're going to need an extra. If you only have 4, you're going to need 5 to do this. Or you can just use a contrasting piece of yarn. It really doesn't matter. And again, you don't even have to do this. This is just to be a visual reminder while I'm doing my cabling. And so what we're going to do is, this is the point at which these cables are going to switch. We're going to start working this style of cable on top of the honeycombs, and the honeycombs are going to be worked on top of these stitches here. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started with this. So now we're ready to begin the cable work. And again, this is over those honeycombs. This is what we're going to do. We're going to work, well, let's go ahead and get that stitch marker, because the stitch marker has done its job to remind me that I'm going to cross these 2 central columns. But first we work front post double crochet over those first 2 stitches, a half double and a half double. Now we're going to cross these 2 into a cable, skip these 2, half double in the half double, and then front post treble in those next 2 stitches. And now we're going to do a front cross. So working in front of those 3 stitches, we're going to front post treble in the 2 we skipped. So again, that's what the stitch marker is all about, is just to remind us to do that center crossing, and then a half double in the next stitch, and then front post double crochets in the next stitch, just like that. And then we work our 2 wattle stitches. After working that, we come to this where the cable was worked, where the central cable was worked, and there we're just going to turn this into a large honeycomb, which is just like that, which we do that just by working front and back post double crochets as the rows progress. So 2 front post double crochets, a half double, and then 2 more front post double crochets, and then a half double, and then 2 more front post double crochets, and then a half double, and then 2 more front post double crochets. Okay. So you can see how these are, this one is beginning to be formed here, and this honeycomb is starting to be formed right up there. So go ahead and work that all the way across, and just like before, when you get to the end of the row, don't forget that there's a back post double crochet that begins the 10 stitch ribbing, and half double in the turning chain. So go ahead and finish row 18. All right, this is what we have after completing 18 rows. Now we're going to turn, and for row 19, it's going to look very familiar again. Again, we start with the ribbing, starting with the back post double crochets over those 10 stitches, wattle stitch, and again, just back post double crochets over those stitches. The only thing you need to work on or watch out for is the center cable. Make sure that you work a half double crochet in between the two back post double crochets, half double in between where those two columns are crossed, and then two back post double crochets, half doubles into half doubles, and again back post doubles, wattle stitch, and then across the back side of the honeycomb that's forming, it's just two back posts, half double, two back posts, half double, etc. You know how to do that. We've done several rows already just like that. So just make sure you don't forget the half double where those several of those cables were crossed. Every other one will have that. All right, so go ahead and work row 19. This is what we should have after completing 19 rows. Now for row 20, let me go ahead and talk you through this one. We're going to work front post, back post, etc. over those first 10 stitches, ending with a back post double crochet. Make sure you don't forget that one. Your wattle stitches. And coming to the cable, we have our stitch marker as a reminder for us. We're going to cross this cable again. So I will go ahead and work this with you, but go ahead and work from the beginning and through the two wattle stitches. So after working those preliminary stitches, let's go ahead and work over the cable, the one that's going to be crossed. So first of all, we work 2 front post double crochets. This is just like we did 2 rows previous. Half double and the next half double. Now we're going to cross this small cable again, skip 2 stitches, half double, and we're just going to work a front cross once more. 2 front post treble crochets, working in front of those last 3 stitches. We work front post trebles in the 2 stitches that we just skipped. All right, followed that by a half double crochet, and then front post doubles in the next 2 stitches. So let's go ahead and pause and take a look at that. So this is what the first and every other cable will look like in this particular row. Again, this is row 20. After we do that, wattle stitch, and then as we work across the larger, or rather the honeycomb section, we just work front post, 2 front post doubles, half double, front post, half double, front post, half double, and 2 front post double crochets. And then of course the 2 wattle stitches that follow that. So go ahead and work this across for row 20, and again make sure you have 10 post stitches for the ribbing at the end of the row, and a half double in the chain 2 turning chain. This is the way your cable should look after completing 20 rows. Now for row 21, again with the chain 2, and we begin with a back post double crochet over those 10 ribbing rows, wattle stitch, and working again back post double crochets over the post stitches. And just like we did 2 rows previous, you need to look out when you do the cables that were crossed. Make sure that you do 2 back post double crochets, a half double in between those 2 stitches, the last stitch and the next stitch where those 2 columns cross, and then 2 more back post double crochets, half double, 2 back post, the wattle stitches, and then again over the back side of the honeycomb, it's just 2 back post, half double, 2 back post, half double, etc., etc. across. So go ahead and work row 21. This is what you should have after completing 21 rows. Now I'm going to give you a large assignment that will take you pretty much to the end of the project, minus the ribbing that will be worked at the end, and I'll return and we'll show you how to work the ribbing. But let me go ahead and give you the row repeats. Okay, we are going to repeat row 10. That's where the front and back crosses first begin. Row 10 through row 21 that we just finished. This is a 12 row repeat. And I'm going to repeat this. Look across the bottom of my screen. I'm going to repeat it that many times. I'll always indicate it there. And if you want to make the throw shorter or longer, you can adjust. You can just adjust the number of repeats that you work for this. Okay, so, and if you need stitch support and want to re-watch these rows with me, look across the bottom of the screen again. I'll put a time mark where row 10 begins. So you can just re-watch, you know, row 10 through 21 again and again, should you have need of it. And let me just give you one more, kind of a little bit of a warning. Be sure after you've worked the front side facing with the cabling, do a quick visual check down the line just to make sure all the cables have been crossed in the manner in which you want them to be crossed. It only takes one moment of inattention to not cross something or to cross something accidentally, and then followed by hours of ripping out and restitching. So you don't want to have to do that. Do a quick visual check. You don't have to count stitches or anything like that. Just a quick, give it a good look, and then continue onward. Well, I'm going to go ahead and work on this, and then I will show you the point at which I transition back to the finished ribbing. Okay, I've repeated this motif here a total of 8 times. And look across the bottom of the screen, and I'll put the approximate size of this throw at this point. Now we are going to transition back to the ribbing across the edge of the blanket. Now this is going to add an additional 2.5 inches. Of course, you can always make the ribbing longer, but I would definitely encourage you to stick with what you did at the very beginning of this throw. However, if you want this to be longer before the ribbing ends, all you need to do is just continue to repeat this motif. And I am ending at a repeat of row 22, which is where both sides look like this. Both the beginning of the row and the end of the row will look like this with the little cable crossing in the center. And we're going to get ready now to work a row of double crochets, which is going to be a combination of double crochets worked in the wattle stitches, and it's going to be some back post double crochets worked over the post stitches. We're just going to continue to work the back side just the way we normally would for this row that's going to transition us to the ribbing. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So for this transition row, we're just going to work the ribbing on both sides the same by skipping that first stitch and working back post double crochet followed by a front post. So go ahead and work those first 10 stitches. When you work over the wattle stitches in this row, we're going to skip the first double crochet, and working in the chain 1 space of the wattle stitch, we're going to work 2 double crochets in that chain 1 space, and then 1 in the single crochet. So I'll do that again. Skip that double crochet, work 2 double crochets in the chain 1 space, and then 1 in the single crochet. So when you work over those 2 wattle stitches, you should have a total of 6 double crochets over that section. And by doing this and working in the remaining stitches in the similar way, these ribbings will line up at the end. Just have to trust me on that. These will work out as long as you don't skip any additional stitches. All right, and so then we work over the cables. Like I said, we're just going to work back post double crochets. Go ahead and work a half double where that cable was crossed. We're going to treat this as a double crochet on the following row. We're going to treat it just like we would these other stitches. And again, just back post double crochets over those post stitches. Let me bring myself back to the spot here. And again, skip this half double. Working in that next half double, which is the center of the stitch, we work a half double crochet, and then again back post, double crochet, just the way we would over the cables. And then half double where those cables were crossed. And back post, double crochet, back post, double, don't skip any stitches. So really the only thing that we're doing differently is what we do over the wattle stitches. Be careful, because with this row it would be easy to just default to making a wattle stitch in these. So skip that double crochet, 2 double crochets in the chain 1 space, and a double crochet in that single crochet. Again, skip the double crochet, 2 double crochets in that chain 1 space, and 1 in that space, the single crochet of the wattle stitch. So again, make sure you have 6 stitches over the 2 wattle stitch sections. And so just go ahead and finish that all the way across, and when you get to the end ribbing, just continue with the front post, back post along that. Now we're going to work the last 6 rows of the ribbing, and let me just explain that for a little bit. Just the way we've been working the beginning of the ribbing, with the front side facing as we have now, you'll begin with a front post, double crochet, back post, front post, back post, and at the end of the row you will end by working a front post in the last stitch. And with the other side facing, with the back side facing you, you will begin with a back post, then a front post, back post, front post, and end with a back post. Okay, just to be clear on that. So for rows 1 through 6 of the ribbing, we're just going to go ahead and chain 2, and again work front post over the first stitch, back post over that next stitch, on and on. And then when we get to the stitches that are not included in the ribbing, like you will have a back post here, and then we'll do front post, back post, front post, back post, front post, back post. And when you get to the cables, I'll go ahead and show you how to do this. So I'm going to work through this section and then I'll continue on with the cable. So as you can see, I've continued on working over those 6 double crochets with the ribbing, back post, front post, back post, front post, etc. And then we're just going to continue that on over the cabling portion. And like I said before, the half double crochets we will treat the exact same way as the double crochets or the post stitches. So we had a back post here, and we're going to follow that with a front post, and then a back post, double crochet, and then that half double will become a front post, double, and then a back post, and a front post, and that half double becomes a back post, front post, these are all post double crochets, back post double crochet, another half double becomes a front post double crochet, back post, then a front post double crochet, and then you're back to the 6 double crochets, and we just continue to alternate that all the way across. And if you crocheted the stitches properly, they will match the ribbing that's on the other end of the throw. So go ahead and complete those 6 rows. This will be the first of the 6 rows. And at the end of row 6, you're just going to fasten off and hide all your loose ends. Well, I hope you enjoyed making the Balmoral cabled throw with me today. If you did, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to comment in the comment section below. God bless. Bye-bye.